My narrative starts in a tiny, warm home where my parents are full of love and joy. My name is Amy. They were my heroes because they both gave their lives to protect and serve as police officers. Even though they were often absent from school because of employment, I recall the warmth of those formative years. Dad's pager rang furiously one calm evening as we sat around the dinner table. He and Mom shared a knowing glance. Mom gently responded, "Sorry, Pumpkin," while holding my hand. "Duty calls." Trying to be courageous, I nodded. "Will you be back soon?" My dad tossed my hair. "As soon as we can, kiddo. You know we're always here, right in your heart." I spent the night with Aunt Martha, the neighbor and reliable friend of my parents. Although Aunt Martha was always sweet, she came off as severe. Cradling my teddy bear, I sat in her living room, trying not to close my eyes. The doorbell rang abruptly. I heard agitated, whispered conversations as Aunt Martha rushed to answer it. I tiptoed to the hallway as my curiosity overcame me. With his hat in his hands, a tall guy dressed in a police uniform waited at the entrance. Aunt Martha shouted out to me, "Amy, sweetheart," her voice shaking. "This is Officer Williams. He has something to tell us." Looking up, I saw the officer's serious expression. His voice was soft as he said, "Amy, I'm so sorry. There was an incident tonight. Your parents, they were very brave. They saved a lot of lives, but they didn't make it." I looked at him intently while the words continued to repeat in my mind, meaningless. I questioned, perplexed. "Didn't make it? Where did they go?" Officer Williams met my eyes with a kneel. "They're gone, Amy. They were heroes, but sometimes heroes have to make the ultimate sacrifice." I argued, "No, they're coming back," as an odd numbness started to creep up on me. They always come back. Even with Aunt Martha's arms around me, I felt uneasy and alienated. My universe had broken into a million pieces, where the assurance of my parents' love and protection had formerly resided. I moved in with my aunt right away after the death. I arrived to Aunt Martha's home on a chilly evening, holding on to the one family picture I had managed to rescue. The mansion seemed bigger and more impressive than I had imagined, towering above me as I cautiously entered. Aunt Martha's voice boomed in the large corridor. "Welcome, Amy." But her tone was more formal than kind. Her features were sharp and seemed to be permanently engraved in a scowl. She was a tall lady. I said, "Thank you, Aunt Martha," and gripped my little purse a bit harder. Linda came bounding down the stairs at that moment, her eyes examining every inch of me. "So, you're going to live with us now?" she said, a hint of contempt in her tone that I would soon come to know all too well. Aunt Martha said, "Yes, Linda," before I could reply. "Your cousin will be staying with us from now on. You two should get along." Linda rolled her eyes and sneered. "We'll see about that," she said, speaking too loudly for me to hear. That evening's dinner was a painful affair. Feeling Linda's eyes glaring at me as I picked at my meal, she said, "So, Amy?" a wicked grin playing on her lips. "Tell us about your parents' last heroic act." I froze, the memory's anguish cutting right through me. Aunt Martha gave Linda a stern look. "Linda, that's enough," she informed him firmly. But Linda wouldn't give up. "Oh, come on. We all know they were just cops. Nothing special. I bet they weren't even good at it." My eyes hurt with tears. I wanted to yell, to protect my parents' dignity, but my voice would not come out. With a sigh, Aunt Martha said to me, "Amy, dear, you must be tired. Why don't you go to your room?" Her eyes softening somewhat. With gratitude for the break, I nodded. "Welcome to your new home, cousin," Linda said loudly enough for me to hear as I got to my feet. The security and affection I had previously experienced were replaced with a chilly apathy and, in Linda's case, overt animosity. Those early years in my aunt's home were when the burden of unsaid anguish started to weigh heavily on me. Every day blended into the next, a swirl of indiscernible side looks and quiet murmurs that I would never fully comprehend. My loneliness was always there, with Linda's voice echoing through the thin walls and the laughing and jeers coming from outside. Pathetic, Amy. A snarky voice from the corridor said, Linda, always hiding in here, drawing your stupid pictures. I bit my lip to keep from crying and didn't say anything. With a smug look and penetrating gaze, Linda emerged as the door cracked open. She leaned against the doorframe and mocked. Did you hear me? Or are you deaf as well as weird? I heard you, I said, avoiding eye contact. Linda's voice softened, but I knew it was a trap. Why don't you fight back? Stand up for yourself? She said. I'm just tired of this game and I just want to be left alone, I said. With malicious glints in her eyes, Linda laughed and said, But where's the fun in that? You know, I told everyone at school about your little hobby. They had quite the laugh. I felt a familiar wave of powerlessness and rage and balled my fists. My voice, clogged with unshed tears, was barely audible as I said, Why are you doing this to me? Linda sighed. Because I can. Because you're an easy target. And because nobody cares about you, not even Auntie. The thought of Aunt made me sting a little. She had always been cold and contemptuous, never a mother figure. Aunt doesn't get it, I said in response. Linda said with a chilly chuckle, Understand what? That you're a loser? I raised my head and eventually met her gaze. I wish you could just leave me alone. Linda laughed. Wishful thinking, cousin. This is just how life is. You better get used to it. She laughed as she walked out the door after that. As I sat there, I had a smaller than usual sense of insignificance. Tears filled my eyes, blurring the drawings in my book. That was when I recognized things needed to change, in the depressing alone of my room. I have to stop living this way. However, I was held back by my dread of the unknown and what was beyond these walls. I closed my eyes, longing for a life and a planet that were different. One in which I might live freely and use my paintings as more than simply a means of escape. A world in which I was more than just Amy, the girl who everyone teased and mocked. However, wishes were just that, ephemeral, impermanent, vanishing like smoke in the wind. So I remained in my room, a prisoner of my own worries, and the only company I had in the never-ending, resonant solitude was my drawings. The combination of Linda's brutality and my aunt's apathy during my last days of high school destroyed me and made me a shadow in the middle of my own turmoil. That's when, on the eve of my 18th birthday, I took a bold decision and stepped out of my comfort zone when I left my aunt's home in hopes of meeting Grace by coincidence, who would ultimately light my way. It seems like yesterday when I recall the day I first met Grace. I was walking aimlessly after the horrible prom dress incident at my aunt's place, my head a tornado of hopelessness and uncertainty. The city streets were chilly and uninviting until I came across a little convenience shop, the bright brightness of which stood in sharp contrast to the gloom that pervaded my inner being. My eyes red from sobbing, I wandered aimlessly around the aisles as I entered. I noticed the cashier, who would later become my guardian angel, for the first time at that point. She said, softly, but with real worry in her voice, "Rough night, huh?" I looked up and saw her kind gaze. "You could say that?" I shot back, trying desperately to put on a grin. Her expression was empathetic as she looked over my belongings. "I'm Grace. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. And not just because it's my job." I whispered, "I'm Amy," after she said something so frank and straightforward. "I don't even know where to start." "I have all night. Why don't you start from the beginning?" Grace remarked, pointing to the empty shop. I totally opened myself to a stranger who would soon grow to be my closest confidant, right there. I told her about living with my aunt and Linda, the terrible event, my parents, and the ongoing bullying. I spoke about how I felt like a shadow in a house that never seemed like mine, unwanted and invisible. Grace listened, her face displaying a mixture of grief and rage, her voice filled with emotion. "That's just terrible, Amy. No one should ever go through that. I can't go back there. What am I going to do now?" I replied, sounding dejected. "You know, I have a spare room at my place. It's not much, but you're welcome to stay, at least until you figure things out," Grace said in a startling manner. It surprised me. "You don't even know me, so why would you help me?" I questioned, perplexed by her generosity. She said with a kind and comforting grin, "Because everyone deserves a chance at a better life, especially after what you've been through. Let me be the one to give you that chance." I was unable to speak. I had never received such politeness from anybody before. With tears starting to fill up in my eyes, I eventually managed to utter, I don't know what to say. "Thank you, Grace." She offered me not only a place to stay, but also a job, saying, "Don't mention it. Just promise me you'll give life another shot. And hey, if you're up for it, I could use some help around here. What do you say?" I nodded and said, "Yes, I'd like that very much," feeling a wave of relief sweep over me. That was the first night of my new existence. Grace became into more than simply a friend. She became my family, my mentor, and my sister. I got the courage I needed from her to face the outside world once again. The area I now named my refuge was filled with a warm glow as sunshine streamed through the curtains. I had moved in with Grace a few months before, and every day seemed like a step toward erasing the memories of my past. Grace said, "Morning, Amy," with a smile as she welcomed me into the kitchen. Her flour-dusted apron revealed her as she turned pancakes. I said, "Good morning, Grace," with a heart full of appreciation for this lady who had unexpectedly become my guardian angel. "You know, Amy, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you considered going back to school or finding something you're passionate about," Grace said, as she set a plate of pancakes in front of me as I sat at the table. She then poured us each a cup of coffee. My old fears were biting at me as I paused, saying, I don't know, Grace. After everything, I'm not sure I can." Grace took a seat next to me and looked at me with compassion. "Amy, you've been through so much, but it's not your entire story. You have so much to offer. So much potential. Don't let your past dictate your future." Her remarks struck a chord with me and gave me optimism that I hadn't felt in a long time. A glimmer of excitement ignited in my breast as I said, "Do you really think I can do it?" "I'm sure you can." Grace comfortingly smiled. "You're stronger than you realize, and I'll be here to support you every step of the way." Her steadfast faith in me provided me with the much-needed support. I started to imagine, for the first time in a long time, a life full with opportunities, one in which my resilience would define me rather than my history. I said, "Thank you, Grace," in a very emotional voice. "Thank you for believing in me." Grace extended her arm to softly grasp my hand. "We're in this together, Amy. You're not alone anymore." I discovered not just a haven to stay, but also a place to develop and heal, where I could once again trust and appreciate myself in Grace's loving arms. I can't help but reflect on the moment when my life turned around, and I found happiness I never would have imagined as I sit here and watch the sun set beyond the horizon. I first met Michael while I was living with Grace and gradually putting the pieces of my history back together. "I think he likes you," Grace said, nudging me one day in the bakery, her mischievous eyes shining brightly. Michael was a frequent client who was always courteous and had an eye-catching grin. My cheeks started to flush. "Me?" "No, Grace, you must be mistaken," I said. I felt the entire idea was ridiculous. With a history as dark as mine, who could ever love this woman? However, Grace was correct. I did get along with Michael, and eventually, I looked forward to his visits. Our talks began with little topics like the weather and croissants and then moved into more in-depth discussions about our aspirations and, ultimately, our pasts. Michael turned to face me as we strolled across the park one evening, hand in hand, the fall foliage crunching under our boots. His normally witty eyes had a seriousness that made my heart skip a beat. "I know life hasn't been kind to you, Amy, but I want to be there for you and create new, happy memories," he said in a soft voice. I can still see my anxiety of being rejected in the past rising as I looked up at him. "Michael, my life is complicated. I have scars." He interrupted me by raising my hand to his lips. We all have scars, Amy. It's what makes us human. I'm not asking you to forget your past, just to let me be a part of your future. That's when I gave myself permission to think that love may exist once again. Our love grew like springtime flowers, and before long, we were discussing our future as a family. The wedding was a straightforward event, but in my opinion, it was ideal. Grace was there, watching me go down the aisle with sad eyes. To love you for who you are and who you will become, was Michael's promise, and it gave me hope. The arrival of our son, Jack, a year later, then our daughter, Emma, enhanced our delight. Their laughter flooding our house as they grew was a salve to my heart that had been hurting for a long time. Emma used to shout, "Mommy, watch me," while she drew or performed a dance move. Jack used to say, "Look, Mom, I can read this book by myself," and it always made me grin. My sanctuary during those years was a world apart from the suffering and hardships of my background. In addition to being my spouse, Michael was also my closest friend and my partner in life. I discovered my fairy tale in our little family. However, I've discovered that fairy tales don't always have the happy endings we anticipate. I can't get rid of the unsettling sense that another storm is approaching while I sit here thinking back on the past. But I'm not alone this time. I can weather any storm because I have my kids, strength, and the lessons learned from my experience. I was standing in the kitchen, the hardwood floor glowing warmly from the sunshine coming in through the window. I was holding the coffee cup I had made in the morning with shaky palms. Michael entered, his footsteps resonating more loudly in my chest than normal. I had a feeling that something was wrong. Trying to appear casual, I said, "Michael, is everything all right?" He hesitated, his eyes sidestepping mine. He remarked, "Amy, we need to talk," in a heavy, serious voice that instantly made me uneasy. I put down the cup and got ready. "What's wrong?" He inhaled deeply. Michael said, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our life together, as his eyes finally locked with me. I had never noticed such a gap in them before. I pushed, my heart beginning to rush. "And?" he said, "I'm not happy, Amy. I haven't been for a while," with words that cut like ice through me. The room seemed to be whirling to me. "Not happy? But why? What did I do wrong?" "It's not you, it's me. I don't feel the same way about you anymore. I think it's best if we go our separate ways," he said almost automatically. My eyes filled with tears. "Separate ways? Michael, we have a family, we have children. You can't just decide this on your own." His face showed anguish as he cast a downward glance. "I'm sorry, Amy. I've made up my mind. I need a divorce." Divorce was a word that hovered in the air like a heavy fog. I extended my hand and took his arm. "Please, Michael, can't we work this out? For Emma and Jack?" He took my hand very gently. "I've thought about this a lot. My mind is made up. I'll always be there for Emma and Jack, but as for us, it's over." The world I knew was falling apart around me, and I was filled with despair. "Is there someone else?" was the question that was burning in my throat. After hesitating, Michael slowly nodded. "Yes, there is someone else." My throat tightened with a sob. "Who?" He remained quiet for a while. "It's Linda." Linda. The name felt like a punch to the body. Linda, my cousin. A torrent of memories of hurt and betrayal from childhood returned. I said, "How could you?" While experiencing a mixture of heartbreak, betrayal, and rage, he responded, "I really am sorry, Amy." But his words didn't seem sincere. Tears and entreaties clouded the talk. However, Michael's choice was definitive. A piece of me broke as he left, leaving me in the kitchen alone. The hard reality of betrayal crushed my vision of the beautiful existence I had dreamed of. I had no idea how I was going to tell Jack and Emma, or how I was going to handle the next several days. I just knew that nothing would ever be the same in my life again. The wonderful life we had created together was shattered when it was discovered that Michael had an affair and that he was filing for divorce. The unexpected invitation to Linda and Michael's wedding came in the middle of this chaos. as I was trying to piece together the pieces of my dashed hopes. This was a moment that had the potential to reveal long-forgotten facts and alter our lives forever. With shock and rage shooting through my veins, I stood there clutching the wedding invitation in my quivering hands. Michael and Linda's wedding. It was so daring that it made me gasp. Emma, my daughter, saw that I was upset. With a worried frown, she said, "Mom, are you okay?" I gave a heavy sigh and extended the offer to her. "It's from Linda and Michael," I responded, a hint of surprise mixed with resentment in my voice. Emma's face became stern. "You're not thinking of going, are you?" My son Jack came into the room before I could reply. He saw the invitation and said, "What's up?" His face contorted in revulsion. He mumbled, "Oh, this is sick." I was conflicted. A part of me wanted to disregard the offer and make no mention of that period of my life. However, a more powerful part of me wanted to confront them and prove that they hadn't destroyed me. When I eventually said, "I think I should go," even I surprised myself. Emma gave me a wide-eyed look. "Mom, you can't be serious." But Jack gave a slow nod. He said, "Maybe we should all go," with a playful twinkle in his eye. Emma noticed his tone. With a faint grin pulling at her lips, she questioned, "Jack, what are you thinking?" Jack moved closer and said very softly, "What if we could show everyone Linda's true face? Expose her for who she really is?" The notion sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. It was seductive, but it was also perilous. With the beginnings of a strategy taking shape, I questioned, "Do you think we can pull it off?" "We can, and we will," Jack resolutely said. The wedding day finally came. With my kids at my side, I entered the arena with my heart racing. The ceremony passed so quickly as our idea raced through my head. Jack nodded subtly to me at the reception. Now was the moment. He slid out of sight, and Emma followed him around stealthily. I inhaled deeply, attempting to slow down my palpitating heart. Jack's voice erupted over the speakers at that same moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" Everyone in the room turned to face the stage, where Jack was standing with a self-assured expression. Mikhail and Linda's faces took on a confused look. He said, "I'm Jack, Amy's son. I have something important to reveal about one of the newlyweds." Emma materialized beside him, a laptop in her hands. When she plugged it onto the projector, pictures and emails appeared on the screen, revealing Linda's deceit and machinations. The assembly moaned and gasped in disbelief. Anger burning in her cheeks, Linda got to her feet. She cried out, "This is nonsense!" Michael's face became pale as he studied the proof. He looked at Linda, his eyes full of incredulity. "Is this true? Linda, did you use me?" As Linda strained to explain, the indignant visitors drowned out all she had to say. I was filled with a range of feelings while I watched. Though I was relieved, my heart was shattered for Michael. The same deception had befallen me as well. The night air seemed lighter as Emma and Jack and I drove away from the wedding. The disorder we caused at the location was little in comparison to the upheaval I had experienced in my life. With a sense of pride rising inside me, I looked at my kids. Jack asked me, his eyes catching mine in the rearview mirror, "Mom, are you okay?" His worry was clear in his voice. I cracked a real grin, one that had been missing from me for far too long. "Yes, Jack. For the first time in a long time, I feel free." Emma, who was usually the more talkative of the two, laughed triumphantly. "Did you see Linda's face? That was epic. She got what she deserved." I nodded, albeit a little part of me missed the mayhem we'd brought about. We did what we had to do. The truth needed to come out. "Never one to take things lightly," Jack said. "It wasn't just about Linda. It was for you, Mom, for all the years she tormented you." When we got home, the truth of what had transpired started to set in as we sat in our living room. The children were talking about the events with excitement, but I was deep in concentration. Emma's words brought me back to the here and now. "Mom, you're zoning out. What are you thinking about?" I turned to look at them and sighed. "I'm thinking about the future. about us and what comes next. Jack took a step forward, his face solemn. We'll be okay, Mom. We've got each other. And that's all that matters. Emma tenderly squeezed my hand as she reached for it. We're your strength, Mom, just like you've always been ours. Their comforting, love-filled remarks were a breath of fresh air. I know, my loves, and I'm so grateful for you both. I may not have had a fairy tale life, but I have something better. I have you two. Jack smiled. So, what's the plan now, Mom? After giving it some thought, I said, I want to start fresh. Maybe I'll start that art class I've always wanted to. It's time I did something for myself. Emma's eyes glowed. That's awesome, Mom. You're going to be amazing. As the room burst into laughter and future plans, I knew I had finally found my happy ending. My children's love and the inner power I discovered kept me alive, not a prince or a fairy godmother. I felt a sense of tranquility descend over me as I gazed about our little house as they carried on their conversation. It had been a long and painful trip, but it had brought me to this point, this happy place.